Doc, do you think Ben Simmons can still be a point guard for a championship team like the one you guys want to become?
Yeah, David, I don't know that question or the answer to that right now. Didn't get a lot of shots, in their defense. I think during that stretch, it was more James, than them. So,
what part of this loss would you attribute to coaching?
I don't know. Would you ask Pop that question? No, you wouldn't. So don't ask me that question. I've earned that.
We are going nowhere all night long. All right? We're just going to keep playing. That's all we're going to do. We're just going to keep playing. And at the end, that'll make us the winner. All right? That's going to make us the winner.
Doc Rivers. If you know anything about him, you may be wondering, how does this man still have a job in the NBA? If you're uninformed, let me tell you. Old Doc is the equivalent of that middle manager at your workplace that no one really likes, and he doesn't do his job that well either. But he's been there so long that no one has the balls to tell him off. In this video, we will showcase Dr. Glenn Rivers' illustrious career of being an NBA con man and continuously worming his way into coaching stacked teams, proceeding to coach them right into the gutter, setting that gutter on fire with gasoline, all while blaming his players every step of the way through. Then rinse and repeat once he finds a new team. Sit back, relax, and enjoy our slander piece on a man that is way in over his head, seemingly mentally and emotionally. The most overrated coach in NBA history, Doc Rivers.
First of all, we need to look how Doc finessed his way into the most inspiring lick of this century, as he was able to steal the Coach of the Year award in the 99-2000 season, while not even managing to make the playoffs. Also managing to not even crack a plus 500 season, as his Magic finished with a record of 41-41. I'll give Doc the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't anything like the future rosters he would come to love, but the squad still had heart and was catching Ben Wallace at the right time, as he was on his way to becoming a serious monster on the glass. These awards always seemed to have some dispute, but the early 2000s had some really amazing teams with some great coaches at the head. So I'm not sure a 9th-seeded coach in his first year is really something I often think about during that era. With all that being said, let's dive into his first years as a head coach in the NBA with the Orlando Magic.
When a young, fresh-faced Doc Rivers arrived on the scene in Orlando in the 1999-2000 season, he probably had the best story in his entire career right in his first year. As we mentioned, he won Coach of the Year, leading a team to 9th place in the East with a record of 41-41. Woohoo! Didn't make the playoffs though. He really did the best he could that season. I mean, what can you expect from a team with Ben Wallace on it? Total Coach of the Year material right there. Stellar selection, year 2000 voters. But you see, it doesn't end there. The following season, he upped those wins to 43. Good job, Doc. And even made the playoffs. With a swift first-round exit, losing 3-1 to the Bucks. But hey, still made the playoffs. Surely this is just the coaching prowess of Doc Rivers. I mean, Ben wasn't even on the team anymore. Instead, Coach Doc had Tracy McGrady having his breakout year, averaging 26.8 points per game, 1.5 blocks and steals both per game, 7.5 rebounds per game, and 4.6 assists per game. So just another scrub team, clearly, that Glenn Rivers MD totally maximized the potential of. Yet again though, in the next season, 2001-2002, the Doc only improves from here, adding one whole win to the Magic season win total, ending at 44 wins and 37 losses. Just pure genius from Doc. I mean, surely this had nothing to do with the multi-year All-Star Grant Hill, who had just been injured for almost every game the previous season, coming back and playing 14 games, right? Yeah, let's just add him to the list of scrubs the Doc dragged across the finish line. Nothing to see here. The 02-03 season is the beginning of the end of Doc's career with the Orlando Magic. You see, he stepped back down to 42 wins that season. This is strange because Grant Hill, while still hobbled from injuries, did manage to play 29 games. Definitely enough to make a small positive impact on a regular season record. And here's the icing on the cake. T-Mac went ballistic and averaged 32.1 points in the regular season in the early 2000s, an era known for slow, grindy games, showing that he was definitely in the conversation for best scorers of all time. They lost in the first round, 4-3 to the Pistons, after being up 3-1. Pay attention to that whole throwing a 3-1 lead thing, by the way. He's kind of famous for it. I don't even really have any jokes for this. How the hell do you squander this, Doc? It's literally the coach's job to keep the team in a state of poise once up like that, and nobody can change my mind on that. On top of that, there's really no excuse once you have a guy averaging 32 points, especially in that era, to not make it past the first round. Especially if you are already up 3-1 at some point in the series. It's not all bad. At least this would be the start of Doc's true passion in life, throwing 3-1 leads. Throwing 3-1 leads with godlike players on his roster. What a thing to be known for. Great job, Doc. He even defended this run down the line, saying, "My Orlando team was the 8th seed. No one gives me credit for getting up against the Pistons, who won the title. That was an 8th seed." Doc, what the hell does that mean? Was it out of your control that you couldn't coach a team with one of the best scorers in NBA history to more than an 8th seed? Also, the man is literally just spitting fake news, as Detroit didn't win the title that year he got 3-1. They won it the next year. Or maybe he's just senile and doesn't remember. I could see that too. What about the fact that, again, hate to keep bringing this up, but you blew a 3-1 lead? Maybe that's why no one gives you credit. And you guessed it, after completely blowing a 3-1 lead, the next season in 03-04, he got canned, after starting the season with 1 win and 10 losses. For any normal person without his luck stat maxed, this would probably spell the end of a head coaching career. Not Doc, however. He instead got a job on an upcoming super team, the Boston Celtics, to be the Ty Lue of the 2000s.
After leaving Orlando, Doc was still a relatively new coach in the league, but it's amazing how getting fired in your 4th year after a 1-10 start can really smack you into reality. So Glennie decided to take the remainder of the 03-04 season off to collect his thoughts and think about what he really wanted in life. And it occurred to him that the thing that he was really searching for was the truth. So Doc packed his bags for Boston, which at the time was being led by a 26-year-old Paul Pierce. Despite struggling to keep above a 500 for the first half of the season, the team was pretty successful and was able to secure the 3rd place in the East, but unfortunately lost in the first round of the playoffs to the 6th seed Pacers. This was the last year the Celtics would make it in the playoffs until the 08 season. Not much changed roster-wise for the Celtics over the next couple years, except an aging and soon-to-retire Gary Payton leaving the team. Other than that, the only change was a sharp decline of the record going from 45-37 and a 3rd seed in 05, all the way down to 33-49 and an 11th seed in 06. A possible first look into the coaching prowess of Doc, as though despite the truce greatest season statistically, and also a great year for Ricky Davis, Coach Rivers did everything in his power to not let those numbers affect their chances of making in the playoffs. Until Doc had at least 3 All-Stars to go in with. See, with 1 All-Star, you can only throw him under the bus once before you get exposed. There isn't much to see but sadness over the 2006-07 season, with the exception of a pretty decent first year on the Celtics from Rajon Rondo, as the team went 24-58, finishing with the 2nd worst record in the league, only 3 games ahead of being able to take the title of the worst overall. But at the end of the year, Doc must have been jumping with joy as he was bailed out by the Celtics head office as they were able to acquire Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and fan favorite Big Baby Davis to fully complete the first modern day Big Three. This is what Doc has been waiting for his whole career, someone's coattails to finally ride all the way to success. And this is exactly what happened, as the season started going 8-0 in the first games, as well as a 20-20-5 game from Kevin Garnett, joining Charles Barkley, Kareem, and Maurice Stokes as the only players to do it in their first game with a new team. Now the Celtics finished the season 1st place in the East, and Doc even ended up winning a couple Coach of the Month awards. But let's not forget 1 year prior when Doc was setting records, having the 2nd worst season in the 76-year-long history of the Boston Celtics. Now let's look at what changed from that year to now. No, I don't think Doc's coaching was too detrimental. The success carried on in the playoffs as Doc had everyone believing.
Anything's possible!
Apparently, the mantra Doc brought in the team that year was Ubuntu, which is a term noting the importance of trusting others and creating a sense of kinship and community. Really ironic when hindsight is 2020. The next few years of Doc's time in Boston is a long, drawn-out, sad era in Celtics history, which deserves a whole video of itself, truly looking into the ins and outs. But all you need to know for this video is that during this time, in the midst of the team's worst beef during that era, when Doc was confronted by Ray Allen that Rondo wasn't passing him the ball enough, Doc decided to take the matters into his own hand and fix everything himself. And how did he do this, you're asking? Well, he decided to bench Ray Allen for Avery Bradley.
And he misses the slam dunk!
But don't get too confused. Doc had no love for Rondo either, as they had already gotten into a fight with each other in the previous season. Head office wanted to keep emotions low, so they had a genius plan to give Doc a 5-year contract for $35 million, which all said and done didn't leave much room for Ray Allen, who was already being told to be on the bench and now was being asked to accept a lesser paycheck for the man who put him there. So after 2011-2012 season, Ray Allen left for South Beach to join Paul Pierce's best friend. Doc wasn't too far behind Ray, as he only stayed for 2 out of the 5-year-long deal with the Celtics. Glad you guaranteed old Glennie that money, huh? It's often said that Doc was the perfect coach for that era of the Boston Celtics in the Big Three, but keeping egos low for a single season, and proceeding to poke every sensitive nerve in sight once those egos get let loose, seems like something Mike, Dan, and Tony could do. The whole Doc era in Boston is kind of a joke if you really think about it. Ubuntu didn't exactly go as planned, as the entire Big Three still to this day won't get in the same room together. And normally when I think of community, the leader almost beating the shit out of the rookie isn't exactly what comes to mind. Maybe the sunny streets of LA is what Doc needs to find his playoff success again.
In 2013, Doc left for the West Coast, and the furthest possible team away from any Boston fans, and nothing seemed more tempting to Doc than the Lob City Clippers. This gave Doc another 3 All-Stars to bank off of: Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan, and continue to give stock to his already inflated career. But what Doc might not have seen coming is the expectations that Doc was supposed to lift the Clippers up out of their recent playoff woes. Maybe this explains Doc's continual playoff stumbles, as he was walking in shoes too big for him to fill. The news of the Clippers getting Doc was enough to excite Chris Paul to the point of tweeting about it. However, Chris Paul should have held his enthusiasm, as that season ended in nothing but another disappointing loss in the second round of the playoffs. OKC took control of the series, winning 4-2. After blowing yet another series with a stacked team, the Clippers front office figured, hey, why don't we promote this guy to the head of basketball operations? It really looks like he knows what he's doing. So, Doc was promoted to the head of basketball operations, meaning for the old Lob City Clippers, that the guy in the locker room giving you pre-game speeches may also be the same guy who ends up being responsible for you packing your bags for another team. Leading into the 2014-15 season, the Clippers were still expected to have another amazing regular season, but unfortunately Doc's ugly playoff habit would veer its head in the 2015 playoffs, when he, for the second time in his career, blew a 3-1 lead in the playoffs. Blake Griffin even said himself that the playoff loss was chalked up to a complete mental breakdown, something a coach should maybe, just maybe, have a handle on, and Doc may have been brought in to fix this for God knows what reason. But as we've seen in his Boston years, that isn't exactly his strong suit. So if we just take a step back real quick here, Doc ended up blowing another 3-1 series lead for a total of 2 on top of multiple blown 3-2 leads in the past. So if you have the pattern recognition of a first grader, I'm sure you can predict that the Lob City era of the Clippers ended in nothing more than a couple second round exits and steady hatred from former teammates. Something oddly reminiscent of Boston. Here's Doc's trick though. He's destroyed so many teams that he now thrives in the environment of toxicity and destruction, and was able to survive the explosive breakup of the Lob City Clippers, retaining his job for a bit longer. During this post-war period on the Clippers, he went through a couple of middling years where the team wasn't expected to make it very far. You'd think that would have been Doc's time to show that he really is one of the best coaches and coach that mediocre team deep into the playoffs. But no, those teams went as expected. But then bang! He hit the jackpot in the 2019 to 2020 season when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George fell into his hands and restored the balance of Doc Rivers coaching players he has no business coaching. And guess what the good doctor did with these studs of players? He took a commanding 3-1 series lead in the second round against sloppy fat boy Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets, and then proceeded to light it on fire and completely throw the series into the trash, bringing him to a total of 3 blown 3-1 leads, a record for NBA coaches. He then got swiftly fired after that poor performance, unsurprisingly. When reflecting on his situation with the Clippers, he basically said that it was all him that made the Clippers what they are today, or a real NBA team, as he put it. Obviously my time here was well spent, Rivers said Friday morning. You look at the Clippers, they're on the map. That was the goal. When I came here, still a laughing stock. Before I got there, they told me, you'll never get a player if it's between us and the Lakers. And I was like, that's bullshit. We're going to do that. And we did it. Didn't reach the ultimate goal of a title, but we absolutely made the Clippers are, and I hate to say it this way, they're a real franchise. And before that, they were not. Yeah, nothing like blowing 2 3-1 leads in one stint with a team to put it on the map. Also, we can't forget that David Stern literally vetoed the Lakers getting Chris Paul before he came to the Clippers. Not to mention, besides Chris, there were a ton of other players who made that team, and would have had success anywhere else in the years they played for the Clippers, like Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, or the countless top-tier role players they've had. Honestly, I'm starting to think this guy isn't actually a doctor. If you could get a PhD in destroying great basketball teams, though, I'm sure he'd be on the honor roll.
Now we get into Doc's current place of employment with the 76ers. Starting in his first year in the 2020-21 season, in which he was already fully set up to succeed after the 76ers made the playoffs for the last 3 seasons. So after a few trades to the team, it seemed that Brett Brown's job was on the line. And you know Doc's name was quick to be at the top of the sheet after his escape from LA. They also had decided to accept refugee Morey for goodwill. The regular season was a great success, but unfortunately the playoffs didn't reflect the same success, as Ben Simmons had somewhat of an underwhelming playoff series. There's lots of jokes that could be said about Doc and how he handled the situation in the aftermath. But we've been pretty hard on old Glenn, so maybe this time we'll just show you the clip.
Hey, Doc, you think Ben Simmons can still be a point guard for a championship team like the one you guys want to become?
Yeah, David, I don't know that question or the answer to that right now. So I don't know the answer to that.
And yep, Wreck-It Rivers back at it again. This statement, along with many others within the organization, may have been what led Ben Simmons' declining mental health. All of this led to Ben ultimately sitting out the entire following season until he forced his way out in a blockbuster trade with the Brooklyn Nets, in which the 76ers gave away Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, and Andre Drummond, and also giving away an unprotected pick in this year's draft, as well as a protected first-round pick in 2027. Giving away all of this, Morey was able to receive in return James Harden and Paul Millsap. This led to big expectations for the 76ers, with some even going as far as comparing Harden and Embiid to Shaq and Kobe. They ended up finishing 4th this season, which was really good considering how stacked the East was. And going into Doc's favorite time of the year, the playoffs, they were able to take an early 3-0 lead, and Doc Rivers must have been punching a mirror and crying somewhere after a loss in Game 4, as he was already having to address suspicions of him blowing another 3-1 lead to a much superior coach. Doc must have quickly escalated to full-on cradle mode, as the 76ers had a disappointing 15-point loss to the Raptors in Game 5. Luckily, the Raptors couldn't throw a beach ball in the ocean though in Game 6, and Philly was able to escape with the win and Doc's reputation intact. Well, maybe a little blundered, allowing Embiid to remain in a blowout Game 6 to seemingly get revenge on a Raptors team that put him in a bad mood. This big-brain decision started with Joel getting hit by the brick wall that is Spicy Pete, ended with Joel fracturing his orbital bone, and with all of this culminating in the 76ers losing games 1 and 2 of the following series with the Heat without their star big man, and an absent coach at the helm. Philly didn't end up making it past the Heat, even with the return of Joel. Immediately after the loss, Daryl Morey felt the pressure mounting of questions on Doc Rivers' future. Felt he had to address the media stating that Doc's job was safe. For now. I'm expecting Doc was filled with joy knowing that he was safe in another year of employment, but Considering all that was being said recently about Morey's golden boy Harden underperforming since his days with the Rockets, it's possible Darryl might have been saying this to keep Doc around as a scapegoat, to save his own and Harden's ass in case this trade proves to be a failure. This is especially sus, as Darryl even said in his statement that Doc didn't have enough time coaching Harden, already laying the pathway for Doc's exit if things don't go well next season. So it seems that Doc's time with the 76ers is still good for now. But stay tuned, as I'm sure if history repeats itself in the form of the last 10 games with his Magic, it will be an especially hot fire in Philly.
After all this, it begs the question of how bad of a coach is Doc Rivers? The answer is not too bad in the regular season when also coaching godlike players, but terrible when the pressure is on. Some coaches are stubborn when it comes to mid-series changes and holding confidence in their team that they'll be able to pull out the win, aka calling it in. And Doc definitely seems to fall into this category. This may have worked one time with a stacked Boston Celtics super team, before super teams were even a thing. But with the abundant amounts of unicorn-like talent spread within the league, it's hard to see how this will be a long-lasting strategy, as it seems most coaching these days is shifting to the on-the-fly adjustments, similar to the style of Nick Nurse of the Toronto Raptors, another coach who, like Doc, enjoyed early success in his career due to having some pretty good players on the roster. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that his Magic teams were anywhere close to the Raptors in skill level spread throughout the team, but Nurse's on-the-fly strategy did manage to win him a championship in his first year as head coach, beating out a stacked 76ers team and Giannis's Bucks, making the Nurse vs. Doctor championship battle tied at 1-1, yet tilted in Nurse's favor, accomplishing this feat on only his first year and having a way less stacked one superstar team on Toronto, compared to Doc's 3 superstars on his Boston team later in his career that he won his championship with. Maybe, just maybe, one day, Doc could stop being so stubborn and also stop blaming his players. But until that day, Doc Rivers will always be in the league, ruining amazing teams, choking 3-1 leads,